In a shocking and disturbing case that sent ripples across the globe, a brutal crime was committed against a 7-month pregnant woman in Sweden. The heinous act has sparked intense debate, with many questioning whether it's linked to the integration of refugees and immigrants into Swedish society. As we delve into the details of this horrific incident, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. On a fateful day, April 29, 2023, at 1 p.m., Melissa Elmberg arrived at her daughter Saga's apartment complex, eager to pick up a few essential items. The family was brimming with excitement, anticipating the arrival of Saga's baby boy in June. The 20-year-old Saga was 31 weeks pregnant, and her partner Mohammed Amin Ibrahim, affectionately known as Amin, were over the moon about becoming parents. The young couple had been together since the fall of 2021, and Saga had been diligently preparing for motherhood. She had enrolled in prenatal classes, gathered baby gear, and frequently shared her pregnancy journey with friends and family on social media. Her close-knit family was extremely supportive, and Melissa had been living with Saga intermittently to assist her during the pregnancy. Melissa had taken a short break, leaving for a couple of nights on Thursday and Friday, April 27th and 28th, to give the couple some much-needed privacy. Upon her return, she rang the doorbell, then knocked and called out through the letterbox, but there was no response. She was taken aback when she realized the door was already unlocked, a habit Saga never broke, not even for short trips to the basement or to collect the mail. As Melissa entered the apartment, she was met with an eerie silence, punctuated only by the sound of running water from the kitchen faucet. Little did she know, her life was about to take a devastating turn. As Melissa entered the apartment, she was met with a sight that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She went to turn off the running water, but her attention was drawn to the bedroom floor, where her daughter Saga lay lifeless, her long dark hair covering her face. Melissa's screams of grief echoed through the phone as she took in the horrific scene before her. A marble top rested on Saga's chest, and a lamp cord was wrapped tightly around her neck, a grim indication of the brutal force that had been used to end her life. In a state of panic, Melissa lifted the table and called emergency services, her voice shaking as she tried to convey the horror she was witnessing. She would later recall the futile attempt to perform CPR on her daughter, whose stiff body seemed to resist her efforts. The coldness of Saga's skin still haunts her to this day. Police and paramedics arrived swiftly, but it was too late. Both Saga and her unborn child had succumbed to the brutal attack. The investigators cordoned off the area, and a murder investigation was launched. As the forensic team began to process the crime scene, they found Saga's body on the bedroom floor, partially on the carpet, between the bed and the TV stand. She lay on her back, her head turned to the left, her arms alongside her body. She was dressed in a pink ribbed set, pants, cardigan and top, but her clothes were stained with blood which covered her face, particularly around her nose, mouth, left eye and forehead. Her long dark hair was matted with blood, obscuring her face, and her tongue protruded from her mouth. Blood trickled from her left nostril to her cheek, a grim testament to the violence she had endured. DNA traces were collected from under her nails and clothing, and impressions of the table base were found on her neck, thigh, and the carpet below the foot of the bed. The lamp, with its cord loosely wound around Saga's neck, seemed to be the instrument of death. The lamp socket was under her left shoulder, with no damage observed on the lamp itself. The lamp's base was circular, measuring about 8.5 centimeters in diameter. As the investigators examined the bedroom and living room, they found all the drawers pulled out, with clothes scattered across the floor. Saga's cell phone was discovered on the bed, underneath a blanket. One pillow on the king-size bed had a depression, suggesting someone had been sleeping on it, while the other pillow remained untouched, implying that Saga had been lying on the bed alone before being attacked. The washroom floor was littered with scattered jewelry boxes, and there were no signs of forced entry on the balcony door or windows. In the kitchen, food was left in a frying pan on the stove, a poignant reminder of the ordinary life that had been brutally disrupted. Shoe prints were collected throughout the apartment, but based on the crime scene, it did not appear that there had been much of a struggle. The coroner's report would later confirm that Saga was strangled and suffocated to death with a 30-kilogram marble slab, a senseless act of violence that had robbed a young woman and her unborn child of their lives. As the investigation into Saga's brutal murder continued, the police pieced together the events leading up to her tragic death. The coroner's report estimated that the death struggle lasted for 5 to 10 minutes, with the estimated time of death between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning on April 29. The police began their inquiry on April 29, starting with a series of interviews with Saga's family to reconstruct the events leading up to the discovery of her body. According to Saga's mother, Melissa, the day before the murder on April 28, Saga had met up with her friends at the Mocha Deli in the afternoon. Everyone had a great time, but Saga appeared nervous, frequently checking her phone as she awaited a text from her boyfriend, Amin. Saga's anxiety stemmed from Amin's plan to inform his parents that he was going to be a father at 7 months pregnant. Saga was understandably on edge about how this conversation would unfold, worried about how Amin's parents would react to the news. While her mom and friends continued with dinner, Saga decided to head back to her apartment around 7:30 in the evening. What the police uncovered was a complex web of secrets and lies. Saga's family knew about her relationship with Amin and their upcoming baby, but Amin had kept his relationship with Saga a secret from his family, who had arrived in Sweden as refugees from Somalia when he was just a child. They were devout Muslims, while Saga and her family were Christians. Amin believed his family would disapprove of his relationship with Saga, especially with her being pregnant out of wedlock. He had confided in Saga that his family might ostracize him if they knew the truth. Rumors circulated that Amin had been seeing other women while in a relationship with Saga. Saga, however, was determined to keep the baby, saying she could raise the baby on her own if necessary. When she announced her pregnancy to her family in October the previous year, they were happy and willing to support her decision. Her grandmother shared some wisdom with her, advising her to think through how this would work for her and her baby, given her current financial situation and whether her boyfriend was willing to take the next step and support them as a family. As the investigation continued, the police were left to unravel the tangled threads of Saga's life, searching for answers to the questions that haunted them. What drove Amin to keep his relationship with Saga a secret from his family? Did his family's disapproval play a role in Saga's brutal murder? And what secrets lay hidden in the shadows of their complex and troubled relationship? As Melissa reflected on her daughter's life, she couldn't help but raise concerns about Amin's cultural background, which was vastly different from their Swedish upbringing. Over time, Amin seemed to accept the pregnancy and even agreed to move in together with Saga in a new, larger apartment on May 2, 2023, with him covering the rent. However, Melissa noted that despite Saga and Amin being together for almost 2 years, she had only met Amin 3 times, which was surprising, given that their daughter was 7 months pregnant with his baby at the time of her death. Melissa also recalled overhearing a phone conversation between Saga and Amin, where Saga confronted Amin after a woman named Diana claimed that Amin had asked her to kick Saga's belly to induce a miscarriage. Additionally, when Diana spoke to her daughter, she said she was sleeping with Amin. Amin managed to calm Saga down, convincing her it wasn't true. Given this story, when Melissa discovered her daughter's murder, she immediately urged the police to question Amin. The police first established a timeline of events on April 27th to 28th. Amin took sick leave from work on April 27th and spent the afternoon and evening at Saga's home. Saga had given him an ultimatum to inform his family about their relationship, the move, and her pregnancy on April 28th. Saga also called in sick from work that day. Amin was supposed to tell his family about their relationship at 10 p.m. when his mom would return from work. Amin was then to come and update Saga directly at her apartment that evening. Around 11 p.m., she expected him to arrive and was messaging him nervously all day, her anxiety noticed by her mom and friends during their meetup at the deli. The police discovered that between 11:13 and 11:15 p.m. on April 28, Amin wrote a message to Saga stating that he would not tell his parents about her and that they wouldn't move in together because he couldn't lose his family. However, he never sent the messages. These facts established Amin as a primary suspect, suggesting a motive for the crime. Instead of telling his family as he claimed he would, he went over to Saga's place. The question was, what happened there? Was it an escalation or a premeditation? Interestingly, police learned that Amin's mom had returned home far earlier than 10 p.m. that day, arriving at 3 p.m. Did Amin already speak with her when Saga was messaging him all day, or did he fail to muster the courage to tell her at all? The investigation was about to take a dramatic turn as the police delved deeper into Amin's alibi and the events leading up to Saga's tragic murder. But was this all just a ruse to string Saga along, with no intention of following through? The police confronted Amin and took him in for questioning. The key updates from the interrogations are as follows. When initially informed about a murder that happened at an apartment in Kungsgatan 36B, which was Saga's apartment, Amin remained calm and even joked around with the detectives. They found it strange that he didn't mention anything about his girlfriend living at the address, pretending not to know the location at all. He did ask who died there, and then strangely questioned the police about how he could possibly kill someone. The previous day, when informed that a woman, Saga, was murdered, Amin immediately claimed he was not responsible for her death, stating he had an alibi for the night and that he last saw her the previous day on April 27th. This contradicted his earlier display of ignorance of the location. Due to the strange behavior, contradicting statements, and the accumulating evidence pointing to him as a primary suspect, police arrested Amin and placed him in custody. Fast forward a few months and Amin was on trial for the murder of his heavily pregnant girlfriend. The prosecution presented compelling evidence, stating that Amin's DNA was found on the stairs near Saga's apartment door on April 29th at 7:20 p.m. This evidence was significant because the tracking dog, Amina, traced the scent and is known to detect scents only up to 24 hours. This strongly suggested that Amin was present at Saga's apartment on the 28th, contradicting his claim of not being there. The defense objected to this evidence, arguing that the tests were conducted outdoors. However, Inspector Hannah Hoare testified that the difficulty level for the dog remained the same, regardless of being indoors or outdoors. Prosecutor Elizabeth Anderson stated that Amin killed his girlfriend by suffocating and strangling her through pressure on her neck, impacting her trachea and the blood supply to her head. Amin entered her apartment using the spare key while Saga was asleep on the bed, as indicated by the depression on the side of the pillow. He attacked her, and they ended up on the floor beside the bed. Initially he likely used the cord, but then dragged the 30-kilogram, or 66-pound marble tabletop, and jammed it against her throat, suffocating her with his weight. As Saga was heavily pregnant, she would have struggled to get up under the crushing weight of the table, which left impressions on her neck and thigh. The prosecution's theory was that Amin's motive was to avoid taking responsibility for the pregnancy and the consequences of his actions. He had planned to abandon Saga and their unborn child, but when she confronted him about his infidelity and threatened to expose him to his family, he snapped and committed the brutal murder. The evidence pointed to a calculated and premeditated crime, and the jury was left to deliberate on Amin's fate. It's estimated that Saga struggled for about 5 to 10 minutes before succumbing to her injuries. Amin then staged the crime scene, pulling out drawers in the room and scattering jewelry on the floor to simulate a robbery. But in court, Amin claimed that Saga might have been killed by a gang searching for drugs. He alleged that he had received a bag containing a large amount of money and other illegal items, and he had previously used some of the contents, which would have infuriated the gang. When confronted by the gang, he pointed them to Saga's apartment, but they didn't know he had used some of the contents. He claimed the gang must have broken into Saga's apartment and killed her when they found some of their property missing. However, this story was inconsistent with the district court's findings. If Amin feared the gang, he wouldn't be living openly and freely in his own residence. There were also no leads, DNA, or forensic evidence linking these alleged illegal items to the crime. And if such property existed, only the killer would know exactly where to find it. Amin claimed Saga had no idea about this, so why was her place not ransacked? Convincingly, this statement worked against him, as it proved only the killer would know precisely where the contraband was. It appeared more likely that Amin fabricated the story. As his friends Samir Talib and Abdi swore under oath that they were unaware of any gang affiliation of Amin, the prosecution presented more damning evidence. Amin's DNA was found on Saga's clothes and under her left nails. Amin claimed they had sexual intercourse on April 27th, explaining the presence of his DNA due to their passionate encounter throughout the apartment. He claimed he never visited her apartment on the 28th. Additional circumstantial evidence used in the trial included phone records from November 2012, showing that Amin did ask Diana Hussein to kick Saga's belly to induce a miscarriage. Amin's cell phone records also showed that he had Googled, "Can fetuses die from kicking?" One of the most revealing details came from examining the text messages exchanged between Saga and Amin on the day she was murdered. Saga tries to cheer him up before his meeting with his family, unaware of the sinister intentions he had in store for her. The prosecution argued that Amin's motive was to avoid taking responsibility for the pregnancy and the consequences of his actions. He had planned to abandon Saga and their unborn child, but when she confronted him about his infidelity and threatened to expose him to his family, he snapped and committed the brutal murder. The evidence pointed to a calculated and premeditated crime, and the jury was left to deliberate on Amin's fate. In the hours leading up to her murder, Saga and Amin exchanged text messages. Amin seemed anxious, saying he felt like he could feel his heartbeat all the way down to his stomach. Saga tried to reassure him, telling him to take it easy and that everything would be fine. But Amin's responses were laced with deceit. He claimed to have told one person about his situation and that they took it in stride, but the prosecutor argued that there was no evidence to suggest Amin had told his family about Saga that evening. Saga's last message was sent shortly after midnight on April 29th, "A simple baby, talk to me." But it's alleged that Amin's cell phone was already turned off, and he was on his way to her apartment to end her life. After a trial that garnered much public interest in Swedish society, Muhammad Amin Ibrahim, or Amin's, fate rested in the balance. The prosecutors reasoned that with these facts, Amin had been found to have motives to get rid of both his relationship and his unborn son. No one else was suspected to have a motive to harm Saga, and the apartment showed no signs of forced entry. The locks were intact, and there were no signs of breaking. There was no reason to believe that Saga would let anyone in easily, especially at near midnight. It had to be someone familiar to her. Amin had a set of keys to her apartment, so he could have also entered by unlocking the door. There were no signs of a struggle that left an impression on the furniture or otherwise on the apartment, suggesting Saga was caught off guard by someone familiar to her, like Amin. The DNA found in the stairwell by the sniffer dog also pointed to the fact that Amin was at Saga's apartment on the 28th, and not just the 27th, strongly suggesting Amin was the one who carried out the crime. The jury was left to deliberate on Amin's fate, weighing the evidence and considering the prosecution's arguments. Would they find Amin guilty of the brutal murder of his pregnant girlfriend, or would they acquit him due to reasonable doubt? The DNA evidence found under Saga's fingernails raised questions about her showering habits. Her mom testified that Saga showered at least once a day and washed her hands frequently, especially since she was pregnant and didn't want to fall sick. If Amin had only been at her apartment on the 27th, there would have been ample opportunities for Saga to wash off his DNA under her fingernails. But the fact that his DNA was still present suggested that Amin was at her apartment on the 28th, and that he was the one who committed the crime. The morning after the murder, Amin deleted Saga from Snapchat, and deleted the last day's text messages and calls from Saga. But the police were able to retrieve the deleted data, which clearly suggested that Amin was trying to cover his tracks before the police even spoke to him. Saga's phone activities on the day before her death were clearly obtained, but her movements on April 28th were a different story. At 8:00 p.m., her cell phone connected to a telephone tower near her residence and remained there, consistent with her returning and staying home. She seemed to use her phone constantly between 12:53 a.m. on April 29th, but then her activity ceased. Before her phone activity stopped, Saga's phone showed several attempts to contact Amin and interactions with his friend Samir trying to get him to contact Amin. On the flip side, Amin's phone and his alibi for the night led to some shocking revelations. Amin claimed that he was sitting in a car with his friend Amir, and Amir was occupied in a long phone call. But examining this in detail revealed a very different picture. From 12:22 a.m. to 1:57 a.m., Amin's phone was left unused, and he received a call from his friend Samir at 12:28 a.m., but it was unanswered. Saga had asked Samir to check up on Amin at that precise moment, and the phone signal placed it near Saga's address, which was contradictory to Amin's statements that he was far away with his friend Amir. Detectives found it implausible that Amin was just sitting in the car next to his friend and not using his phone at all during that time. The time that his cell phone was unused coincided with the time it was unaccounted for in his alibi, providing the opportunity he had to commit the murder between the window of 12:28 to 3:30 a.m. Also, both Amir and Amin's cell phones were mysteriously turned off at precisely 2:16 a.m., while Amin's phone still had 40% charge remaining. This suggests that one person had both phones on hand. His phone being turned off was also an unusual pattern, given the previous days and times of use. Finally, during the initial questioning, Amin outright said he had an alibi for the night of the 28th, which was a strange thing to say before he was even asked about it. This indicated that he may have pre-planned what he was going to say when he was questioned by the police. Despite the lack of clear direct evidence in this case, the circumstantial evidence was considered strong enough to assess the case in its entirety. But some were hopeful that the lack of direct evidence could not prove without a reasonable doubt that Amin was guilty of the crime. The jury was left to deliberate on Amin's fate, weighing the evidence and considering the prosecution's arguments. One piece of evidence that seemed unanswered was the footprint found in Saga's apartment that did not match Amin's. Nevertheless, this does not rule out Amin being there on the 28th. Amin completely denies any wrongdoing, saying, "I have been in denial for 9 months now," in one of his last interrogations, and claiming that he loved Saga. The investigation into Amin's fears that his family would disown him for dishonoring the family name was found to be inconclusive. In short, no evidence seems to indicate that the family was even aware of his pregnant girlfriend and that he had told them they would move in together a week later. It's likely that Amin made up this excuse, hiding behind his religion and Somali heritage. We will never know if his family would have welcomed their baby and Saga with open arms into their lives. Swedish court chairman Lars-Gunnar Lund stated, "This is an honor-related crime." The Swedish police even defined their version of this type of crime. According to the prosecutor, Mohammed Amin Ibrahim lived in an honorable context of his own definition, where he was not allowed to be with white women. On June 5, 2024, 22-year-old Mohammed Amin Ibrahim was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Saga. The court was unanimous in its decision. Amin continues to deny any wrongdoing, saying, "I love Saga and our common child, and have never had any thoughts, ideas, or plans to kill Saga. Violence is not in my nature." during the trial. Amin and his defense lawyer believe that the perpetrator must be someone else, and they plan to appeal the verdict. The case raises questions about cultural norms and the role of honor in shaping individual behavior. It also highlights the importance of considering the complexities of human relationships and the motivations behind violent crimes. Remember to drop a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more true crime documentary and updates.